Welcome to the second session of today's BCP Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting. Without further ado, I'll ask Claire, to read us some housekeeping notices out. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Please note that this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Board is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Claire. Agenda item 2, substitute members. Have we got any substitute members tonight? Thank you.
Sorry, apologies for this meeting. We've got apologies from Councillor Butt and Councillor Farr and Councillor Allison. And then we have Councillor Borthwick substituting for Councillor Farr.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Do any councillors have any disposable pecuniary interest or any other interest on any items on the agenda? It would appear not. Thank you. Agenda item 4, public issues. Are there any public issues, please?
No public issues for this meeting, Chairman.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, scrutiny of transport-related cabinet reports. And the one we have this evening is concessionary bus fares policy. Could I call upon Councillor Mike Green, portfolio holder for sustainability and transport, to introduce this paper? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Good evening, everybody. This is it's a very similar paper to one that came a few months ago to the Overview and Scrutiny Board, as it's around the English National Concessionary Travel Scheme, whereby as councils, and each of us are a concessionary travel authority, look to reimburse the bus companies where people use bus passes. And the idea is in normal times that they should be no better nor no worse than if they hadn't been offering those free fares. As we discussed a few months ago, the bus patronage took an absolute hiding during COVID. It went down to around 10 to 15% of its pre-COVID level. And although there has been some considerable recovery, we're still somewhere between about 60 and 70% of the pre-COVID level. Although there was no absolute obligation to do so, it was made very clear to us that DfT expected the council to do its bit and to continue to pay to reimburse the bus companies as if it was at pre-COVID level. There is a small adjustment for the general decline in bus patronage over the course of a couple of years, and also because of a small difference in the mileage that the bus companies have been travelled compared with the pre-COVID level. And so what that meant was that our total payment was somewhere around £7.67 million per year that was expected for us to give. So there was no absolute legal obligation to do so, but the government made it very clear that all authorities were expected to, and indeed we believe that all local authorities did exactly that around the country. It also is a little bit of a circular thing, because we as a local authority, of course, was receiving support for coronavirus from the national government. We are then passing on a little bit of that support to the bus companies, who themselves were also receiving grant from the government, bluntly, because otherwise they would have gone bust. So we're at the situation now that we are providing the equivalent of about 7.67 million per year to the bus companies, even though the patronage at the moment is only roughly 65% of the pre-COVID levels. What this paper does, and again, it's come through from a request or a guidance that has come through from government at the end of October with their new COVID-19 recovery guidance. which is effectively a tapering off of that arrangement to take place starting from the beginning of the next financial year. And so the expectation is that local authorities, including ourselves, will continue at 100% of adjusted pre-COVID levels until 6th of April 2022. At that point, we would be expected to go down to 90% of the subsidy that we would have done pre-COVID, and every 2 months thereafter reduce that down by a further 5% until we hit the level that the actual patronage is running at. So if, for example, patronage were to continue at 65% of its pre-COVID levels, then we would pay 90% in April and May, 85% in June, July, going down, 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 and then in February, March of next year, we'd be down at 65%. And so we would actually already be paying them just for the service that is effectively provided. If, as we all hope, the buses or bus patronage recovers quicker, and let's say it's jumped up to 80% by then the number that we would be paying wouldn't fall below that 80%. So we're pretty much providing a guaranteed level, if you like, and that guaranteed level is dropping. But if the actual number we should be paying rises above that guarantee, then we will of course reimburse the bus company to the extent that we would normally have paid out. So that pretty much is it in a nutshell. We won't be able to know exactly what that level is at which we bottom out. So it's one of these strange ones where we actually hope that we overspend rather than underspend, because it'll mean that the patronage is back again. But this is something that is necessary for the bus companies. It is something that we've done around the country, and if anyone has any concern about the money going out to those bus companies, you might want to have a quick look at page 35 of the report, which shows what I've sort of dubbed the cycle of despair, which is what happens if the bus companies become underfunded. We very much feel as though the bus companies are going to be our genuine partners as we move towards a lower carbon transport arrangement for the whole of BCP over the next few years, and this is the way to make sure that they're starting it at an appropriate level. So I hope, Mr. Chairman, that it would be quite an easy one for you this time, certainly compared to last.
Thank you, Councillor Green. So I'll open this up. Councillor Slade, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. I've got a couple of questions about there's absolutely no issue. This has got to be done, hasn't it? There's no question over that. My questions are around. Clearly, this is all councils around the country being asked to do this for the bus companies. But what's the quid pro quo? What are bus companies being asked to do to proactively encourage passengers, particularly concessionary passengers, back onto their facilities? Because I know there's these Christmas offers, but it feels like the concessionary bus users are using it during the day to get to the hospital and get to the supermarket. So what are we asking them to do, or what are they proactively doing? And secondly, has there been any real consideration given to whether there is a permanent shift in how particularly older people are going to choose to travel? I know certainly in my area, a lot of the more vulnerable residents are choosing not to use their concessionary bus fares and are instead choosing things like dial-a-bus, because they're a little bit, they have to pay for a little bit towards the service, but they are a bit more bespoke and they feel safer. So is there any consideration about whether the model around how concessionaries prop up the service that might need to change, and how the bus companies might need to replace some of their concessionary users with paying customers instead? I know that's a bigger picture, but is this about managed decline, I suppose, rather than just putting off the inevitable?
Thank you, Councillor Slade. Councillor Green?
Yeah, thank you. I think very interesting, interesting questions. As far as the quid pro quo is concerned, the bus companies are doing everything they possibly can to get their patronage numbers back up. And that includes, for them, obviously, it doesn't really matter too much whether it would be a bus pass that the council's then paying them for, or a regular paying customer. What we are doing though is we've, as you've seen from previous papers, moving towards an enhanced bus partnership. And that is something that I hope, having put together the improvement plan, which is out for consultation at the moment, is something that I hope will be a lifeline to those bus companies. Actually, no more than the lifeline, because I hope that they'll be able to expand as we move forward. So the quid pro quo, we don't need to demand that they do everything they possibly can. They're hanging on by their fingertips at the moment, and they are working very well, I would say, with us to try to get to where they need to be. As far as is there a permanent shift? No, I think the question is no one knows. I really hope that there isn't, but I can see that, or certainly when I say there shouldn't be a shift, I mean, hopefully there will be no more of a permanent shift than there will be from other forms of transport where people may have learnt during COVID that they don't need to travel around as much. So there is the chance, I think, that we'll see a drop off because of that. But I would very much hope that it would not be any more than we would see in other modes of transport. It is a national scheme, and therefore I do not believe so far that there's been any move towards looking at a different form of compensation and towards dial-a-bus, etc. I think everyone's pinning their hopes on the idea that we will be able to get over this, and that transport, particularly public transport, will recover to its previous levels.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Green. Members? It appears not, Councillor Green. So I think we can close the debate on this one. Thank you very much for coming this evening, explaining that to us. And I think we have basically no problems with the report as it is. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. So members, moving on then to agenda item 6. And these are finance-related cabinet reports, and we have 2 reports here. The first report is to consider the Q2 budget monitoring report, and the second report is the MTFP update. I think we can probably take them together, or certainly sequentially. And I'd like to call upon Leader of the Council, Councillor Drew Mellor, who is also the portfolio holder for Finance and Transformation, to introduce the reports to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening, members. Yeah, so in terms of the Q2 budget monitoring report, these are numbers that would have been circulated through the Budget Cafe as well, so the members would have been through them before. I'll give a quick summary of them. An improved position from Q1, so that's work from Adam and his finance team and across the services that have brought that better into line. The overarching position is a £10.2 million overspend. Largely to do with, there's a breakdown in the report which I won't go over, but a significant amount of COVID pressure, some one-off in nature, some we need to keep an eye on. I think it's clear, and we've said this a number of times, children's services is a priority area, and that's got significant extra funding. At the service level, these are down from, in Q1, the position was 12.6, so we've moved that down to 6.5 million. And there's, in total, there's about £6 million of mitigation. Quite a lot of that is one-off in nature, so rescheduled capital programme and some other bits and pieces. There's the fees and charges increased grant that we were able to get from government, which was also helpful. So the net position, Chair, is if we draw down 4.2 million of our tranche 5 COVID grant funding, and just to make members clear, there's 8.2 million of that still available to us. then we get to a balanced position. So very much moving in the right direction, Chair. Did you say you want me to take both papers at the same time? Or?
No, I'll tell you what, we will stop there and we'll deal with this one. And have you finished now, Leader?
Yeah, that's effectively the position I was going to get into.
Thank you.
Improving as we go, still work to do, significant amount of work that has been done, but very happy to take questions on that now, Chair. Thank
you very much, Leader. So, members, do we have any questions? Councillor Earl, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just through reading this paper, in paragraph 35, it talks about the created locally satellite special schools, which was to cope with, dealing with the HCP and making sure that children are going to a closer school rather than having to spend long times on car journeys. But of course, it says that has contributed to actually a pressure in special needs education, transport. So I just wanted to find out, because I was sort of assuming that would lead to a reduction in that cost, but it seems to have gone up instead. So I was just hoping for more clarity there. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, I think effectively that is, and by somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, but there's been a significant upturn in the number of EHCPs. So although one of the reasons we brought forward the £10 million capital fund, that's to create more places locally. Until that is actually delivered, then we've still got a significant issue, bluntly, in terms of SEN travel. So, and the large upturn in EHCPs, education, healthcare plans, means there's a continuing pressure on that budget. So there's two aspects which are really important here. One is, we don't believe, and I'm sure other colleagues wouldn't believe either, that it's right for children to have to travel significantly, outside of their local communities to receive a tailored and decent education. But secondly, that costs us a significant amount of money on a revenue basis as well. So I believe that's in relation to the uptick in EHCPs. And Adam is our Section 151 is nodding. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Anybody else? Councillor Howell.
Thank you. I'm a little confused about the staffing issues in relation to children's services. I did ask a question in the Budget Cafe about whether we were competitive with other areas of the country and whether recruiting people from outside the area actually forced us to pay more because they wouldn't have a local connection, and therefore we would benefit less from that kind of loyalty of serving your own community. And Elaine did say that wasn't an issue, and I certainly left that meeting thinking we were paying competitively with other areas and that staffing wasn't a particular issue in children's services going forward. So he might have been talking, it looks like we could have been talking at cross purposes, because the section of this paper in around point 30 onwards suggests that we still have a significant problem in recruiting permanent staff in this area. So I would welcome if the leader could explain whether, could perhaps confirm that we are paying competitively in this area, and and give some reason, explanation why we are continuing not to be able to recruit people to these established positions.
Leader?
If I may, yeah, thank you. It's a really good question. It's an important part of the budget to focus on because there's a real, for two reasons. One, because of the absolute importance of us and priority in and around children's services, and that service delivery piece, and that will be, every indication is that it's easier to deliver when you've got a more permanent workforce. So there's an operational point there, and Councillor Howe's also right from the financial the point. So effectively, my understanding is that there is still significant difficulty in recruitment across children's services. We've got a large number, more than we should or would want to have, in terms of agency workforce. One thing I will just update committee on is that we're now our permanent team, our senior leadership team across children's services. We've now just effectively recruited permanently to the last few posts in that. So at the senior team level, we now have a permanent workforce in place, which is hopefully really good for us in terms of finances and also operationally. It's a difficult environment. It's a very, very difficult environment. In recruiting generally, there's significant wage pressure across the economy, but particularly in and around children's services. So we are doing a number of things. Where we're looking to be proactive and creative in terms of recruiting people from overseas. There's some really good examples of where that's worked very well. We're looking at increasing our partnerships with the university so we can do a better job of growing our own. And we are looking at how competitive we are, regionally and nationally in terms of our pay. I'm not going to stand here and say it is a very difficult environment to be trying to recruit in this area. It has to be a priority for us, not just for the financials. That comes second here. It's actually about operationally delivering children's services function. With a high degree of permanent workforce. Other than agreeing with Councillor Howe that he's right to call it out, Chair. I'm not sure if there's anything else Councillor Howe would particularly like me to try and respond to.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the leader won't be able to give this information now, but I do think it is important that as councillors we do see some evidence of what the rates are across the country and how if we are out of whack with what's being paid elsewhere. But I also suspect that given how expensive it is to live down here, that we would need to pay a premium in this area, and also in order to kind of escape this catch-22 situation of agency workers, we are perhaps going to have to pay more than we might otherwise do, to persuade people out of agencies and back onto into the workforce. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was interesting. I think we had a debate. I can't remember which one of the. I think it was maybe in children's overview and scrutiny, but there were a number of the managers, management grades positions that were filled by contract agency staff, and there were over half of those of a particular grade that were filled with temporary contract staff. And there does appear to be this issue about attracting, but then that might be peculiar to the children's services area, but it is a difficult question. So yeah.
But I would really like to understand, because obviously we are paying significant amounts of money to these agencies. That money could be used to increase the salaries of the employees, and therefore reduce the attractiveness of working for an agency. I think I'd like to see some evidence that we're trying to unpick that problem, and I think we need some figures to be able to do that.
Happy to briefly come back, Chair, if that's helpful.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind. I'm just looking to see if that's a reasonable request and something that we could look at as an action somehow.
It was to some extent it's going to be a question I was going to ask you, Chair, because there is I think Councillor has absolutely right. It's a really valid line of inquiry. Whether the right place to do that is in this forum or in the Children's Services overview and scrutiny, I'll be led by you. I can absolutely feed back, and I will feed back to the Children's Services Directorate that this was a line of inquiry from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee today. I think it's worth saying as well, we're going through a harmonisation of pay and grading project as well, and I think that'd be particularly relevant in terms of children's services as we bring those together. The logic is sound, isn't it, from Councillor Howard? We're paying people agency rates, we could pay more. I am assured, and I have asked this question myself, about our journey towards permanency in terms of staff. It's been a well-stated priority of our DCS and the senior management team to get there. So I believe we're on a journey to levelling that, but I do think there are wider national regional pressures around one, availability of staff in this area, but also the wage inflation. Chair, I'll be led by you, but I will certainly be asking Children's Services for an update, which we can either share to Councillor Halfrevis or a children's overview and scrutiny session.
Yeah, that's great, and I think probably to close it down, I could probably take an action to write to the chair of the Children's Overview and Scrutiny on the issue to see.
The only point I'd say is this may well apply equally to adult social care as well, and that's all I'd say.
Okay, I'll take the action there, Leader, to write to the chairs. And actually, we do have the chair of the adults, so. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I was just sort of following on from this, because I don't think people always work for an agency just because of the money, because they don't get all of that money that we pay the agencies, because obviously the agency take off the top. It may be they want part-time work, or they may want to say what certain hours they want to work. So I think if you're going to look at the agency stuff, I think you need to know, why do people want to work for agencies and not want to work for councils, etc., sort of full time? I think it's all part of the equation, really.
Okay, I mean that was a comment more than a question. Any other members? Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a query about paragraph 22, the shortage of home care workforce leading to a high number of residential care placements. Obviously, we know there's a major problem in social care workforce. Obviously, Jackie just referenced as well, but this feels like an issue that's likely to increase. Is there what is the plan to reverse it or to address it, because that's potentially going to give quite a significant need for an expanding budget in that area? Is there a plan?
Yes, Leader, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So again, agreed. Workforce and adults as well as children is a pressure area for us. The answer is relatively similar, and not surprisingly, we're looking at different ways of recruiting and retaining and motivating our workforce. So the pay and grading project comes into that. Again, with our arm's length local authority trading company, Tricuro. I've had discussions, I'm on a member of that board, and I've had discussions with the MD there, again, how we can more scale up, recruitment, and actually probably this is probably more relevant in adult social care than children's social care at the moment, because of work with universities further down the line on it. But there is a real opportunity through Tricuro to actually do a larger grow your own project. The answer is exactly the same. The exposure is exactly the same. I would say one of the other things we're looking at doing in around adult social care is I know Councillor Rampton's been quite clear about this when we've taken some papers through cabinet, but is extra care. So we and across the board, one of our strategies in and around our budget pressures is how we can be a bit more interventionist, in terms of some of the markets. So in children's, social care, we're looking at certain things like how we can stand up, further send places locally, how we can look at housing some of our more high need residential looked after children more locally in adult social care through extra care, and trying to, the scale of the opportunity and also the gap for us in and around the amount of extra care provision we need. And just to quickly highlight, so for instance, if we're keeping people offering people the opportunity to be in an extra care environment, that means they're often able to stay in that home for much longer before they then enter residential care. So they are able to live happier, better quality lives, in and around a home that they're comfortable in, because they've got that wraparound, both all the digital care provision, but also any other care needs that they've got, and then they can gradually move into further more traditional residential care. So Councillor Slade's as right as Councillor Howe. The answer, I believe, is intervention. It's about us training our own and growing our own staff, as well as looking at ways we can deliver services differently. Extra care is an example of that, Chair.
Wrong button. Any other members? Councillor O'Neill, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's more to do with the question about the what was mentioned earlier about COVID, the central balance that's been released, leaving 4 million to support future COVID pressures. I suppose two questions. In terms of that release, is that money ours, or is it attributable to a government grant, and therefore could it be challenged in the future? And if COVID pressures exceed 4 million next year, will that balance be capable of being transferred back readily?
Leader, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I'm getting confused by your buzzers. I'm not sure if but as far as Adam's got his hand up, but effectively that is our money. You know, it's been given to us in a grant. It's unfettered, so it is a revenue grant. One of the things we've wanted to do is to not immediately put that into the mitigation against COVID pressures, because we've wanted to, as we go through the year, we wanted to really sort of like challenge the overspend. You know, we didn't want to give a blank check. So I'm really pleased that at this stage of the year, we're looking like we're still actually being able to take some of that, you know, £4 million of that into next year. So Tony, in answer to the question, I believe that's fully our money, so not subject to any challenge going forward. And it's for our revenue, you know, needs as and when we see fit. And we're looking to take at least £4 million of that into next year, which I think, you know, considering it's around about 8.8 million we started this year with, that's actually quite a good success considering the amount of COVID pressure we've had.
That's lovely. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Okay, I've got a question, please, Leader, and it relates to the capital programme, Bournemouth Poor Neighbourhoods capital programme, and it also does cross over to the financial risk to the HRA capital programme, in that, you know, we're warned that these capital programmes costs are escalating through inflation, and in particular labour and material costs and lead times on materials. The example I think we're given on the Wilkinson Drive capital budget within the HRA programme, a way of managing that is to reduce the number of properties from 13 to 11. So basically getting 11 for the same price. You know, these are fairly significant cost increase effectively. Now, given that these capital programmes normally have an element of contingency in the estimating process, one would hope that the cost should be contained within what's been allowed, but we are warned that, you know, there's likely to be quite a cost escalation, and we're going to be asked to pay for some more money for them, basically. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is there a mechanism of containing these cost escalations on these types of programs through fixed and firm price contracts? Because that would be a way of de-risking the programs. Just as a matter of policy, I wonder if that's something that we can look at, because it does appear as if, you know, there's going to be quite a strain on the capital programme. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. So I think, you know, absolutely that's something we can take away. I think every time a capital programme is gone into, at the point of then agreeing to do it, we will be looking at what would be the best way to contract that. Is that just on a normal, you know, contingency, you know, having contingencies there, or is it in and around, you know, fixed price contracts? You know, Adam, I'm sure will give you a more detailed answer on exactly what we are doing at the moment and what our exposure is, Chair. So perhaps it'd be better to defer to our Section 151 officer.
Good evening, Adam. Thank you.
Chair, yeah, just you know, I think that the leader's right. In a lot of cases, we have fixed bill contracts, but even with fixed bill contracts, there are certain clauses with regards to force majeure, etc., that come into play. So you can never guarantee, you know, that it'll actually be within the agreed sum on the circumstances that lead to the additional costs increases. But generally, they're seldom. You know, across the board at this moment in time, you know, we are seeing some significant inflationary pressures on capital programs, and in a number of areas where those capital programs have already been brought forward to members for approval. it is leading to some revisions of those scheme costs due to those higher than assumed originally inflationary factors. That's why I think through this report and in previous reports and through various different decisions that have been taken, this matter has been addressed through the appropriate governance forums. One thing just to highlight the fact that the approach the council's taken on a number of its capital schemes is to recognise the cost over the lifetime of the asset and fund it through borrowing in order to spread that cost over the people that actually benefit from that asset's creation. Taking that approach actually, in this circumstances, then has some kind of symmetry in that approach, in the sense that if you looked at the HRA, the big driver for the rent increase is the September RPI. So if you've got a higher September RPI, that's going to create more income in the HRA to then potentially pay for the slightly higher debt charges as a result of these cost increases. So it's seeing it that there's a quid pro quo within the system for this, within the housing revenue account.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else, members? Okay, we haven't got any more questions on that. So we can move on to the next report then, please, Leader.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. So in terms of summarising this, this is a 5-year MTFP for the year 22-23. This is a significant improvement. We've moved down from a 25.1 funding gap to 7.8 million. And just to give some context in the 5-year position, we were in the last quarter looking at in the region of £86 million, gap over that 5-year period, and that's now down to 44.6. So really quite a materially improved position. Again, I thank the team of officers who've helped to deliver this. Still a way to go, but we are really closing that gap and getting the council in a much better financial position and sustainable financial position. What's closed the gap in this period? Well, a number of things. Our income has gone up, so we've had a really good performance in terms of our place generally. So some car parking income, seafront's done well. I think we took quite a prudent position as we always will when we put our budget together in terms of fees and charges, and that prudence, we've hit it and we've overachieved it. So it's good there. But I'm trying to think what else material in place. The recycler income has gone up. Again, that's not nothing of our that we've driven, but the wider macroeconomic, we're getting better money for our recyclers. I think transformation costs reprofiled some of those, which has saved quite a bit. And actually, materially, one thing you will notice we just talked about is we've actually now formally looking to release the tranche 5 grant into the budget as well. Chair. So overall much improved position, but there's some detail in the reports. There's still a way to go. And we've the test and challenge, the government grant there as well. We've had in. So yeah, Chair, I'm very happy to take any questions as and when they arise.
Yes, thank you, Leader. So members. Wow. No. Leader, we do not have any questions for you. In that case, I'll thank you for attending this evening. And thank you, Adam.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Bye. Okay, we'll go on to the forward plan now, agenda item 7. Has anybody got any comments they'd like to raise against the forward plan? There's a couple of things that I want to just sort of give you a bit of a briefing on. Councillor Slade, did you have anything you wanted to add at the moment? Okay, thank you. Let's quickly go through this. Yeah, in January, as you know, we actually have 2 meetings, one on the 5th of January, one on the end of January. I can't remember the date, 31st of January. Yeah, and the first session on the 5th of January, as you're aware, we're going to have this an inquiry day, and what we decided to do, we think is, well, we're going to suggest to you that we do was just have one meeting. It may reach on into the evening, but we won't have one meeting on the climate, the inquiry session on the climate change. As it happens, at the moment we do have the acquisition of Queen's Park Leisure Centre, but I understand that's going to come off I think it's going to be coming off that agenda. And there's also the future of the Stour Valley revenues and benefits. It's the other one we've got planned. Personally, I think we can pass my suggestion and just concentrate in this one session on the inquiry session, if you're agreeable to that approach. And I think I see everybody sort of nodding. Unless you're nodding off to sleep. Yeah, you're okay with that? All right then. So I think in principle that's what we'll do. As you know, I have written to you all asking you to volunteer. I've given an outline of the questions that you may wish to lead on during that session. And I think what we would like to do is, get some structure into the day, so that we're not repeating each other, and also important that everybody can take part and engage in the debate. So if everybody does take it, now I've already had 4 volunteers, so I don't need too many more. I might even volunteer for one myself. But please look at the email that I sent round, and hopefully that'll provide the basis of a really good session on climate change. So moving on then to the end of the month. Sorry.
Can I just ask, you've got down climate change, you've got Councillor Green present. I presume if we're all going to be asking different questions on different departments of the council, I think we need to find out who's going to ask questions and ask the relevant officers to come along to it.
Yeah, I mean, Vice Chair and myself need to do a lot more work on this. We've just set out the preliminary ideas, and I think that generally the board seemed to be agreeable to the approach that we're going to take, because we will be considering the report, the performance report, effectively against the climate action plan that the council has embarked on. So that'll be the first bit. Then we'll do the inquiry session, and then we'll wrap it up with what we need to do to take it forward. But you're absolutely right, because the climate change inquiry does go right across the council. We may well invite every portfolio holder. We haven't actually decided how we're going to approach this yet, but we will make sure that the people, including some outside agencies as well, that we may bring in with the relevant expertise. So yeah, watch this space. Okay. Anything else I want to mention? Oh yeah, I think it's probably worth mentioning the commissioned work. Yeah, the BCP local plan working group is not likely to start again for some weeks, and so we're going to take the opportunity of during that hiatus, if you like, is to introduce the working group on enforcement that we've been waiting to do for a long time. I have asked for volunteers for the working group, and I'm delighted to say we have a sufficient number of volunteers. And I've sent out the paper that we originally considered about enforcement to give a bit of a theme to it. And hopefully, I wouldn't envisage the working group lasting for too long. I think probably 2 or 3 meetings may be sufficient, if only to draw up a list of priorities that we believe the council should be looking at in detail. I mean, dog pooing and all the rest of it. These things come straight at you. What does everybody complain about? And where do we need to put the action for enforcement to because our residents are really getting sick to death of not getting the attention in certain areas. It's really what we're trying to establish through this working group. So hopefully we'll be able to kick off with one meeting before Christmas. Hopefully we've got to agree that. And then take it from there. Hopefully that'll be finished before the local plan working group starts up again. So that'll be good. And I think that's all I've got to say on that. Anybody? Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Dedman.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's for the meeting on the 31st of January, and we've got down Councillor Rigby's request for the water runoff and sewage overflows, but it very firmly says Pool Bay surface water runoff and sewage overflows. And although it does actually say across BCP, I'd very much like it not to be only pool, because we do have beaches up our way.
It will cover the whole
Yes,
BCP area.
I want to make sure it does, because our
will.
residents' association are getting very hot under the collar. So, no, Christchurch Bay is Christchurch Bay, Councillor Stripley.
It will cover all areas of BCP. Thank you. So, members, unless there are any more questions on that note, okay. All right. So now, future meeting dates, please note them. And with that, unless there's anything else, I'd like to close the meeting. Thank you. Good night.